Did you? Oh, that's your paychecks. I'm sensing hostility in that statement, Brian. Hey, how are you doing? I sent you a text, you didn't reply, so I figured you might I thought I sent it to your
Thank you. Oh, thanks. So this is a thing you prepared?
I sent it on Tuesday.
Hey, Diane.
I got lots of cough drops. So I don't cough.
Oh my gosh, this is a big bottle. Thanks. I was down there earlier. I want to put that in.
Your
I
eyes,
everywhere.
your phone. Do what they tell you. Take the time.
It's got like a nice
Took
little
5 months
situation,
off work. Most of it was pretty much because
just in case, right?
So I keep telling my kids, my dad was only 71, you get $75,000 more to work. And they're like,
Really?
really? I said, let's see what you think.
mine
What
was
you know?
mildly on house.
They live in that area over there.
To get
Albanians, Albanian drugs.
mine come back so big because when I started getting sick, I wanted to get cold. It intensifies that because your brain swells. All the way down and then you start spinning. And that just come back last week. We found that out.
Because I want to
You guys before me or after?
really
You guys are
question
probably
this.
Part was talking to Steve about the orange and the.
I'm just gonna say on my face, this is Joe Paul.
Oh, yes.
It would probably be good if I did stay because I'd be a little bit more knowledgeable.
They said, well, the sampling is so small, then we need to reach out.
Something simple. She just needs to make sure it comes to this desk.
Did you find it?
It's where there's all those the pie charts.
You don't want
So we like the rest of that.
All right.
Very set that clock.
You're absolutely correct.
To be
It's
right.
5.5 years ago.
Ann, it's good to have you.
Yeah,
Glad you're able to make it.
I got my cough drops lined up right here.
There you go.
And with the correct spelling too. And with the correct spelling too.
Did they have your name spelled incorrectly?
The first time I seen it, the A-N-N-E on my class. Oh, right. Somebody over the city? You know.
Make sure you look at your phones.
There's 28 in there.
Seriously, I'm through the whole thing. I don't have that. It's not in this.
It might be in it, but this is what he gave us, and it's 3 articles.
Oh, see,
I put that in the sheet.
okay, yeah, I don't have that in.
We need to swear in our new planning commissioner as well.
Yep. Is he here?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay.
Thank you, Morgan, for the water.
Keep your arms and legs under hydraulic. Have fun. Look at this.
Yep. Joe. Diane. That's for you. She's excited. We're about to get started. Everybody have a seat. If you don't, we have some seats up here. You're surely welcome. If there's overflow, we've got a place downstairs. We're going to put the YouTube up. And in essence, there'll be about a 3-minute pause between what's taking place here through that camera and what they will see and hear downstairs as the 3 minutes. If you choose to go down there or whatever the case may be, and I'll try to tell this as people roll in, then just recognize in the public comment period of this discussion, I need to have you at the pulpit, and then I need your name and your address, okay? So we're about ready to begin here in about 1 more minute.
Stan? Just a whole new one, see.
Morgan, is the
I see.
recorder on? Okay. Let's go ahead and get started. Hey, thank you for joining us, okay? We got a lot of things we want to cover tonight. We have obviously some input we'd like to take from the residents. And so we'll kind of go through a series of things. I think you may have seen an agenda. If you have that, we're going to follow the agenda. For those who would like to make public comment on anything, including any issues dealing with form-based code, we're going to do that during the public comment period. It'll happen right after the conversation. So work with us as we go through this process. We surely want to hear what you have to say. What we'd like to do is first recognize that it's the Roy City Council for February 4th, 2020. It's starting at 5:30. We do have Councilmember Burrell, Councilmember Saxton, Councilmember Jackson, Councilmember Paul, and Councilmember Wilson with us tonight. So we're pretty excited we got everybody here. We've asked Councilmember Wilson if she would go ahead and lead us in a moment of silence as well as the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you.
If you please join us in a moment of silence. Thank you. If you'd please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, Council, we've got some consent items. Looking for approval on December 3rd, 2019 Roy City Council work session minutes, the January 7th, 2020 and January 21st, 2020 City Council meeting minutes, as well as the November 19th City Council meeting minutes. We also have the approval, looking for an approval, review and consent of the approval of an alternate planning commissioner, Mr. Jason Felt. So council, do I have a motion then to approve these consent items?
Mayor, I make a motion, we approve the consent items with the amendments that was talked about last council meeting on the minutes.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Perfect, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Jason, okay, thanks. We're going to have to swear you in, so if you would mind, where is he? Jason, thank you. Please, Jason Felt has been asked, and he has volunteered to support us on the Planning Commission. We appreciate that, so we're going to swear him in as a Planning Commissioner.
I state your name,
I, Jason Felt,
having been elected or appointed
having been elected or appointed
to the office of Planning Commission,
to the office of Planning Commission,
do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support, obey, and defend
that I will support, obey, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and the Constitution of the State of Utah,
and that I will discharge the duties
and I will discharge the duties
of my office with fidelity.
of my office with fidelity.
Thank you. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have a presentation from the Victims Advocate, Kim. Which one, I assume both of you guys are going to talk, so that's perfect. Please. We do have some chairs before they get started, if you'd like, some here as well as some over here on the right, if you'd like.
Okay, well, while this is getting set up, you'll be able to see it on the screen. We're both victim advocates. My name's Kim Colai.
And I'm Jada Napoloni.
I've been in service here for Roy City in the Victim Advocate Program for about 2 years.
And I started working as a victim advocate in September. And we'll get started. So our job as victim advocates are to help victims understand the criminal justice process, ensure they know their rights as a victim, and we facilitate victim services.
So our VOCA grant funding, most of the funding for our Victim Advocate Program comes through a grant by VOCA, which stands for the Victims of Crime Act. The city matches about 25 to 30%, including in-kind services and a cash match. And each year we have about 2 to 5 student interns who come and help our program. They're able to gain valuable experience as college students, and we also have high school students that come and volunteer as well.
And like I said before, part of our job is to ensure that victims understand their rights under the Victim Bill of Rights, which was passed in 1987 in Utah and constitutional legislation in 1994 to ensure, 1994, excuse me, to ensure that all victims and witnesses of crime, especially children, are treated with courtesy and sensitivity. So the bill includes some of the following rights. The right to know their role in the justice system, they have the right to be informed, the right to be safe, and the right to receive restitution for crimes. And so we make sure that the victims in Roy and West Haven know their rights and that they have access to resources and help that they need.
Okay, so some of our responsibilities as victim advocates include the following. Receiving reports and referrals from both the police department and the court. We collaborate with the Roy City Police Department. We provide information and resources to victims. We collaborate with other advocates and organizations through Weber County and throughout the state as well. We attend court for victims and alongside victims. We help victims pursue civil and criminal protective orders, whether that be here in our court or at District Court in Ogden. And we assist victims with receiving restitution or CVR through the state.
So part of the victim assistance that we offer is collaborating and working with an organization in Ogden called YCC, which stands for Your Community Connection. They have a lot of great resources that we help victims get connected to. including counseling. They have a rape recovery program, lots of great resources there. We help victims safety plan if they're in dangerous situations, and we help them find resources based on their individual needs and circumstances. We also help victims fill out legal paperwork, including protective orders, CVR, and completing victim impact statements. And we support victims through the court process. We make sure they're informed and that they understand what's going on, and we also provide emotional support because it can be overwhelming. And then we also convey victims' wishes to the prosecutor and to the judge to make sure that their voices and interests are represented.
Okay, so our grant is broken down into 2 years, and each year there are 4 quarters. So this graph shows our quarter that we just reported on, which is October through December. And these are the different types of victimizations that we dealt with. We helped a total of 107 total victims in those last 3 months. 52 of those victims were domestic violence cases, 14 were uninsured accidents, 11 were thefts, 9 were adult physical assault, 8 child abuse, 7 criminal mischief, 3 disorderly conduct, 2 threats of violence, 2 stalking or harassments, 2 DUIs, 1 adult sexual assault, and 1 animal attack. So that just kind of gives you a brief understanding of the type of victimizations that we deal with and the different types of victims that we're able to help.
And we want to say thank you to everyone who works with us and supports and helps us, especially Brody Flint, Matt Andrews, Andy Blackburn, Camille Cook, Brady Hammer, and the Roy City Police Department.
Okay.
Do you guys have any questions for us?
Council, questions, comments?
Appreciate the work you do.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
have a question. So you say we, so obviously it's just not you two that help all these people? You have a committee or?
So we're the only 2 victim advocates as far as the program that we have here at Roy City, but there are others that help, including the police department. They're a big help in helping refer victims to us through reporting. And then, of course, we work with the prosecutor, Brody Flint, and he's a big help in helping the victims receive their wishes through the court process.
So that's what I was going to ask you. So they get referred to you, obviously, through the police. So
Yes.
it sounds like a great thing you're doing for them.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Let me ask a question real quick. You mentioned 107, and that caught my eye, for both West Haven and Roy.
Yes.
How many of those roughly are in Roy, of that 107 that you identified and worked with in the second quarter?
I'd have to go back and look up those stats and go through and figure that out. But I believe last year when I gave this presentation, about 70 to 75% were Roy City.
Okay.
So we can look at the numbers and get back
Please.
to you with that.
Yeah, I'd like to see the numbers, and particularly if you'll help us with the YCC component.
Okay.
If you're making referrals to YCC, I'd like to have that number as well, okay? If you don't mind.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's something we can.
Council, any other questions, comments? Okay, well done. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very informative. Okay, the next item on our discussion is going to be discussion on form-based codes for both the Front Runner Station as well as the downtown business districts along 1900. What I'd like to do on this, we're going to basically provide the council some training, some question opportunities. But to begin this, I'd like to, if you would, I'd like to basically just take a couple of seconds and talk about a couple things on some presentation charts. So would you hook me up, Morgan, on so I can get this up on the screen? I think I've got it set. There you go. Okay. Let me just, Council, let me just talk about a couple of things as we begin this conversation, and then what we're going to do is turn over some training. We need to get some insight. It's a short training session, answer some questions, and then we'd like to get into the public comment period. Let me begin, if I can, Council, just to make sure we understand why we are here. First thing is that I want to make it clear there will be no vote tonight on approving, modifying, or denying any form-based code recommendations from the Planning Commission. We can talk about that. We can even give some taskings to the city, but there will not necessarily be a roll call vote requesting you to make any changes or modifications to this particular recommendation. If it was, we would have had to restructure the agenda to talk to that. This one is simply a conversation. This meeting was simply to provide then some instructions to you, some training, and give you an opportunity to ask some questions, okay, to the contractor as they present this information. Now, once the training and the discussion period is over, there will be a public comment period for anyone to make comments and ask questions on anything that's on their minds, okay? So I just want to make sure we set the groundwork in terms of what we expect today. I want to talk, if I can, with you and just talk about a couple of things here. I want to talk about the economy. I want to talk briefly about population. I want to talk about affordable housing. I want to mention about Senate Bill 34, and I'm going to talk about Matson. I'm going to ask you to think about some things as we go through this discussion. First, let me make this clear if you have not already heard this numerous times coming out of the state. Utah, in October of 2009, and I think it's perpetuating even now into the new year, Utah is the #1 state in the entire nation in terms of private sector job growth. #1. It is also the #1 job growth in the nation in just total jobs. This is an incredible economic boom that's happening in Utah, and we have found ourselves right in the middle of it. Now, the interesting facts with that is that take a look at the unemployment rate. We are sitting at 2.3 unemployment rate. And with that, the economics people will tell you that if you get at 3 or below, you are fully employed. And we are way, way down below that. It's been a long time since we've seen those numbers. So the bottom line is that this is a healthy economy, and it's growing. There's a lot of great things happening. But here's one of the interesting things that's also happening, is you look at our population. In Utah right now, and I know these numbers are a little bit fuzzy, you might not be able to see those, but let me just talk about this. In 2010, before we went into the Great Recession, we were sitting at about 2,700,000 some odd people in population. In 2020, they're projecting we will be at 3.3 million. And as you well know, in 2020, we take a new census. That will be happening in April, and we'll get a very good, clear picture of what this population is going to be, hopefully in Roy as well as the state. That's pretty dramatic. And if you want to hold the numbers, you're looking at over 500,000 people that has happened to come into Utah as part of this population explosion that's taking place. But what's really interesting, if I can basically tell you, as you look at the numbers, we're seeing about 52,000 people every year. And to give you kind of a dynamics of what that means is, you're looking in the state of Utah, you're looking basically all the people in Hooper, all the people in Riverdale, and all of the people in Roy coming into this state. Now, before we go up there and basically says, I know where the problem is. The problem is we basically haven't closed the borders to California. The fact of the matter is this is not a California issue. 60% of all of this population growth is coming from us. It's our families. It's our kids. It's our grandkids. And of the 40% that's actually what they call in-migration, the reality of that is that that's what's basically driving. There's a lot of people, a lot of opportunities. And to be honest with you, my experience I've had with people who work and lived outside of Utah and come to Utah, they either love it or they hate it. And a lot of people love it, they come to stay. There's something magical, for a better word, about Utah in terms of what we provide. Now, it shouldn't be as a big surprise that the highest per capita rate of births result in Utah and South Dakota. It's kind of a mixed bag right now. But that's interesting. Highest number of births. It's generating a lot of families, and those families want to stay here. We have the lowest per capita deaths in the nation. So our population's lasting longer, living longer, providing assistance longer. And we rank 12th among states in per capita in terms of net immigration. And so the key to that is that we've got this influx of people coming to this wealth of great opportunities that provide in this great state. Now, what does it do to us? One of the interesting things, if you're not aware of, it's driving prices up. The median price in Salt Lake City, and you can look at the numbers, median price of a house in Salt Lake City is $361,000. It's $361,000. And I can show you the number that shows what the median price in Roy is, $269,000. What's interesting, I want to point out, if you don't mind, is in the last 10 years, in that very 10-year period between 2010 and 2020, we have seen a 65% increase in house. It's just, it just drives me crazy how much houses are costing today. And I guess really what it's coming down to is, I'm on fixed income, and I'm telling you, I'm not seeing a 65% increase in my income, okay, in 10 years. It ain't happening. So what is that doing? It's creating a real challenge for us. The average monthly mortgage payments, and the numbers are there. You know, I don't make this stuff up. I'm just pulling data because this is a dynamic environment. But surprisingly, Weber County today has some of the less expensive per capita mortgages along the Wasatch Front. Look at these numbers. Even our partners in Davis County, the median is at $1,500 a month for mortgage. Is it any surprise when I drive around that I see people who live in Roy and they're driving patrol cars for North Salt Lake and Salt Lake? Why? It's because they can work there and live here. And all they have to do is pay for transportation. It's really interesting. Now, what's the market, what's the housing development doing? When this all happened in 2010, this recession took place, I am telling you, there's a backlog. And we had a lot of people. When I went to a meeting with the realtors about 2 years ago, they said there were 50,000 demands, households that needed houses, and they just didn't exist. 50,000 in this state. That's a significant amount of people basically in people's other houses are renting. And what's interesting is, and I can testify to this, how many of us have our family living with us, in large part because they can't afford housing, can't afford to buy a house. Some can't even afford today to even pay for rent. We're in an interesting time. The numbers are fascinating. And in terms of what they're building, if you look at that red line, they've invested roughly about $6 billion, okay, in 2019, just trying to catch up in residential housing. $6 billion in this state, just to try to catch up, and we are not. Let me repeat, we are not there, not in this state. Let me talk about Roy. Roy City, much like all the other municipalities, was faced with an interesting situation last year after the legislators basically approved Senate Bill 34. This is the third bill out of previous 2 years prior to that where, in fact, the legislators were pushing to try to come up some way to deal with affordable housing. If you want to see how serious it is, look at Senate Bill 39. That's the one that's working through legislation today. This one got approved last year. Right behind that in this year is Senate Bill 39, and it goes right to the heart of affordable housing. Let me tell you what the law says. This was approved by the legislators and approved by the governor. What it basically says is this: communities are required to develop a moderate income housing plan as part of their general plan. Communities that are required to annually report their moderate income housing plan implementation must satisfy these requirements to remain eligible for state transportation investments. I want to talk to you about what that means here in a second, because it's important you understand that. But the municipalities that have a fixed guideway public transit station, simple words, this is a front runner station. It says this: you shall, not will, not maybe, you shall include a recommendation to implement either G or H. And here's what G and H says: encourage higher density or moderate income residential developments near that transit station, or eliminate or reduce parking requirements for residential developments where a resident is likely to rely on their own vehicle. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know how to enforce number H. That's like going up and says, I'm going to have them build a house, but I'm not going to allow them to park on it. Or if I do allow them to park on it, they're only going to have one driveway. Can't have two. Can't have two. We got to reduce it. And what that's going to do for a person that has two vehicles in Roy is we'll park that other vehicle somewhere else. Probably on the street, maybe down the street, but it's going to get parked. And the challenge is going to be is, I don't know how to do number H. That one's going to be a tough one. But I understand number G. Now here's the tough one. This requires, under the law, that the Department of Workforce Services Division for Housing and Community Development to assist in the creation of a moderate income housing reports and evaluate the reports for the purpose of determining eligibility for state transportation funds. And let me just be blank on this. The fact of the matter is, that interstate that you're seeing up there, which is I-15 right there on 5600, is moving through the process to get developed. It's hard. It's tough. And by the way, it will cost the taxpayers to change that interstate, which has to be done. If you've been driving at all on Interstate 15, if you've been driving at all on 5600, you will know it's a parking lot. And the reality is it's going to cost $154 million, today's money, to do that interstate, and $74 million to widen 5600 from that interstate all the way down to 3500 West in Roy. Those are UDOT properties, they're UDOT roads, and the fact of the matter is that we have some problems with traffic. And if you've lived in Roy long enough, and you know we got problems with traffic. And this is UDOT's approach to fix it. We got to widen it. But here's the kicker. State Transportation Investment Funds. That's the funds that basically will pay for all that. Here's what it says. Or the Transit Transportation Investment Funds. Those are the funds that are basically used to fix up any of those front-runner stations. May not, let me repeat, may not be used in a municipality that fails to adapt a moderate income housing plan or fails to report the implementation of their plan as determined by the Department of Workforce Services. I don't know how to tell you any more than this, to tell you this is the problem. I don't like this. I don't like this big stick. And this son of a gun is in law. And Roy City has found itself in a tough, tough spot. So the city council, by law, had to pass before 1st of December 2019, had to pass in its general plan, which they did, had to pass the goals to be compliant with this law. And here's what it says. And I will just only get to you, I want to focus primarily on Objective 4 and in the general plan as adopted and approved by the City Council. It basically, number B says this: the plan then encourages higher density or moderate, and I want to repeat this, or moderate income residential developments near a transit station. And then C, eliminate and reduce parking requirements for residential developments as indicated, I said earlier. And I will be honest with you, I don't have a clue, Council, how we're going to do that. I mean, I just don't have a clue. But it's now in the general plan, and we have to deal with this big elephant in the room. Let me continue. I suspect most of you are here because we're having a conversation. And let me repeat, this is not a decision. We're having a conversation that talks about what's going on at that rail station, particularly the front runner station. Let me just make it clear today in terms of what we have today. The things in green, and you can see the green lines there, the green spots, and if you can see this mouse, I think it's, you can see what I'm trying to do, maybe not. Those green spots, that is considered right now to be residential estates RE20. I put RE15 because it was a little confusing, but it's RE20. All that basically means is RE20 says a single-family home is zoned today for that green spot, a single-family home that has to be on a minimum of 20,000 square feet of land. RE20, that's what it means, okay? Single-family residential, and if you look at the single-family residential, that's everything else basically all around that station that's in that kind of a tan color. And you can see that. That's all residential. Many of you, I suspect, live there. That is RE18, and oh, by the way, which is 8,000 square feet. Some of those properties I think are bigger, but it's at least a minimum 8,000 square feet. And today, the code says, you cannot build in that property, either the green property or that somewhat tan property, anything higher than 35 feet. Today, that's what it says. But I want to point out what's in the purple, and this is important you see this. What's in the purple today is called light manufacturing. That is that entire corridor of purple that you're seeing there, and the law today says the building height can be no more than 60 feet, literally 6 stories. That's the law. And you're not going to like this comment, but if a developer and a landowner today walked into Roy City today or tomorrow and basically says, I want to put a development on there that meets the zoning requirements, there's not a thing anybody in this room, no city council, no lawyer, no court can stop that from happening today. So we got to fix this. We got to fix it. But here's the interesting part. What can go in there? And I just picked a few out of the 20 that's on the list. They can put in there recycle collection. It's zoned for that. Manufacturing, up to 15,000 square foot buildings. Self-storage, contractor offices, and basically storage areas. It's quite a list of all the different things that area is zoned for. And if anybody wanted to put a 60-foot building in there, they can today. Now here's the other interesting part. Today, UTA owns at that, what they call a transit-oriented station or development, they own 18 acres. If you'll kind of look up there, you'll see those little triangles up there. Everything that's red, UTA owns. That's their property. Roy City owns a couple of properties, okay, to the north, across 4,000. That, about 6-7 acres, is owned by Roy. And Roy owns that one piece to the furthest right that's got a yellow triangle in it. And that triangle in there, that yellow one, is actually a pump station. That's where we have our water station, okay? Interesting enough, it was put in that plan. But there's a piece just down from that that Roy also owns. We own that property. That's Roy City property. Everything else around there is in the hands of the private. You probably own property in that area. I know some people in the city council own property in that area. So the bottom line is that that's where the owning. But here's the pieces I want to share with you. UTA has several expectations and goals in transit-oriented development. This is their property. They want increased ridership. They are absolutely convinced that if you live within a half a mile of that train station, you're more than likely going to walk there instead of take a car. Half a mile. They basically have said in their plan, they says to optimize development, they says they want that station community to have 25 dwelling units per acre. 25 dwelling units per acre as a minimum. Some places down in Salt Lake are 50. Some places down closer to Bountiful, I think it's Woodcross, they may be closer to the 25, but they expect and will not develop unless there's 25. And of course, their purpose then is to generate revenue. But here's the real interesting piece I want to make sure we all understand, Council. The law was written on these TODs, these transit-oriented developments, and the law was written that simply says you can have 8 UTA and only 8. And today, the 8th one went in. If you're familiar with being down at Clearfield Station, Clearfield was the 8th. The law will not allow UTA to develop that 18 acres unless the law's changed. Can't change it. Can't do nothing with it because the law won't allow it. But I will tell you, UTA right now is trying to get legislators to try to find out if they can change that law. I'll just be blunt with you. But what's interesting I want to share with you, the fact is that we could not do anything on any of that UTA property anytime until after the law is changed. So we got time. We got time to do this right. I'm getting close to the end. I want to talk about the proposal in terms of the map, and this will be talked about at some length here, but let me just point out a couple of things, Council. First thing is that there's a piece of property, and I'll go to the left and move right. There's a couple of pieces of properties I just want to point out. That piece of property that's sitting there that I've circled towards the top closest to 4,000, that piece of property's got a well on it. That's a deep well. That's a water thing. We're not going to do anything with that property. This property may talk about, for a better word, we may talk about some mixed use, or we might be talking about something we can do with form-based code, but it's a non-player only because it's already consumed. I will tell you that piece of property the UTA owns, it's got that elongated circle there, that tucks up against a hill, up the side of a hill. I'm really concerned, Council. Now, I got a good friend of mine, Norm Searle, down in Riverdale, and I'll be blunt with you, he was really concerned about those houses falling off that ridge. And that's Riverdale. And I don't need to tell you the legalities of what happened and what you've been reading in the paper about that problem. But I'm going to make a point here, Council. I'm not so sure anything should be developed on that land and never cut into that hillside. Anything, in large part because we ill afford to do anything to damage that landscape. And although it's UTA property, fine, but just don't do anything with it, UTA. Now let's talk about the pieces moving into the yellow. You know as well as I do, up 4,000, we've got a brand new elementary school put in, we got a brand new library in, and we put a pretty darn nice park in. Council, I believe all that is a non-player. I don't see any way that should be put in this process and it should be taken out. And oh, by the way, the hash marks across 1900, that's runway. And by the way, Ogden City owns all that land. And there are some FAA standards that says you can't do anything with that property, ever, as long as you got that airport there. So if you kind of look at the pieces that we can work with and look at in terms of Innovation District, we may have to scope that a little bit different, only because what's there today really can never change. I'm almost done. Now, many of the Roy residents indicated to me as I'm talking with them and visiting with them, and they're emailing me and I'm getting phone calls, made these comments. Many of the Roy City residents indicated that they are concerned that the city has been working this form-based code in the Planning Commission for a year and nobody knew anything about it. Okay? The city has provided the public notices according to the law and has done the things they were supposed to do, but you didn't know anything about it. Here's what I'm willing to do. If the residents would be willing to write down their name and email address, and if you, before you leave today, you're willing to give me your name and address, any discussion by the city council on this topic, dealing specifically with the train station that happens, I will email you and tell you. The law says I have to basically put it in terms of the public announcements. It will be there. We do that well. But unless you have nothing better to do, I doubt most of you are going to pull down the planning agenda for the day and you're going to look at it. But I'm going to make sure you know about it. And if you believe you have a voice in this conversation, if you honestly believe that you can help us to do this right the first time, then we'll get the invitation to you, and we'll invite you to have a conversation with us as we start to work this thing through and figure out how to approach this. All I'm asking is put your name and email on this list. And you will get a note from me personally that says, we're going to talk about it on this date. I'll try to give you 2 weeks' notice. Be there. Last comment. We got some opportunities here. I think we can do some great things. But this is a discussion about form-based code. It's the start point. But I believe this council is committed. We're not going to address this issue in a vacuum. We need your input. We'll welcome your input. But we will move this city forward. And what we want to do is we'll make sure we do it right. And you have a right to have a voice in this process. So with that, council, what I'd like to do then is I'd simply like now to go into the training. Let's get the training. It's about 15 minutes long, I believe. Give us a high-level view. You may have questions that you'd like to entertain with. That's perfect. And then I want to hear what the public has to say and what they're thinking so we can kind of make this thing whole work for us. So if you'll do that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask then if I can get this to being passed around and start signing up if you don't mind. Okay? So with that, who's starting? Perfect.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to start the training, I guess you want to call it. I'm just going to kind of talk about the differences between traditional code and form-based code, just so it doesn't seem to be a scary monster when it's said. Then I'll turn some time over to Lance, who is our consultant with the code, and he'll kind of give you a 30,000-foot level introduction of what the code says and talks about. Okay? This presentation I gave you guys, I want to say a week and a half ago in a little packet, again, just to kind of help break down that monster, what form-based code is. By definition, traditional code focuses on the type of uses allowed on the land based on the notion that each space should have one singular use. Where form-based code focuses on the building form as it relates to streetscape and adjacent uses. It encourages mixed use, relies on the design concepts and patterns intended to preserve the assets and character of the community. So if you think about it, when cities originally were built, pre-1926, when zoning was adopted in most states and cities, that's how downtowns developed, was a mixed use. You had my shop at the bottom level, my house on the top, grocery store, it was all mixed use. So traditional code kind of separated that back in 1926 when it was all adopted and the Supreme Court stated that it was a legal police power of the cities and states to do. Up until that time, you had mixtures of uses. You had those things right next to each other. We have evidence of that if you just drive 6,000 south. You've got an old, it's probably been many things, but right now I think it has a sign about a floral shop. It's a little square building. They're on 6,000 before you get to the rail trail. Then you've got the cannery right next to houses. You've got mixtures of uses in older parts of town, just like Ogden, Salt Lake, and some of the other bigger cities. Traditional code, again, as mentioned, looks at the use first, design and form second. So how does it relate to the street? How does it relate to other buildings? How does it relate to the community is the last thought. It's what use is there. Where form-based code reverses that. How does this building relate to the community, to the street, to the other buildings on that particular street? Design and use becomes secondary. So again, it's just a change of thought of, again, when you look at some of those older towns, if you like the persona and stuff that's going on there, it's because they looked at the building first and how it relates to the community versus what use goes in there. So that's really the change in the two. Traditional zoning focuses on use, attempts to segregate community according to different uses. Form-based focuses on building form, preserves community character through design. Traditional discourages mixed use and may prevent development in certain areas. Every parcel has to be zoned something, even if it can't be used, like the mayor had pointed out, the airport where the runway is will never be built on, but it has to be zoned something. What that is, it really doesn't matter, because the airports, unless it goes away, it'll never be built on. But we still have to have it zoned something. That's why the zoning map changed, or wants to change it to the innovation district rather than business park. Anyway, form-based, again, encourages mixed use, promotes walkable communities. Again, if you look at a lot of the downtowns of bigger cities, you can come out and you can walk a couple blocks and hit hundreds of different things, where a lot of urban city sprawl, Roy, Hooper, West Haven, you don't have that walkability. I've got to get in my car, drive 800 yards to get to the next thing and park. Traditional zone attempts to create uniformity and apply parameters like setbacks, heights, densities, floor area ratios. Form-based code focus on the role that individual buildings serve in shaping the public streetscape. Again, how does it relate to the street and the community? The process, traditional zoning uses minimum setbacks, but the ultimate location and form of the building within the building envelope is unpredictable. Again, all our homes, all our buildings are at a minimum, so can't be any closer than 25 feet, but you can definitely put it back farther if you want. So there's not consistency. It is unpredictable in some things, and development has to go to planning commission in a lot of cases to get some of that figured out. Form-based code, again, is looking at developers following the code, and when I say the code, it's how does the building look, what materials does it use, again, how does it relate to everything. This is an old slide, because our ordinance doesn't look at this. I don't approve it administratively. It will still go to the planning commission for approval, but it's a lot more indicative of what the building should look like and the style of building, not necessarily, you just meet your setback and then everything goes. Examples, a store downtown is leveled due to fire. Code dictates the following infill requirements. So in no case shall the new building or infill buildings that is in this district set further back to established building lines. So old code would look at it where the upper is what it used to be, the lower one is what it could be. What form-based code would basically say is look at the rest of the block and rebuild like it used to be. Again, how does it relate to the street, the rest of the development, where you could have almost a single-family home in the middle of it, even though it's not, just something smaller, not consistent within it. So in summary, form-based code emphasizes physical character of development. Form-based code looks at the public design process and creates clear vision, illustrates example design elements rather than numeric standards and text, and encourages mixed use to reduce the need to travel. Again, if I can walk somewhere, park my car, walk somewhere, I'm gonna do that if it's walkable. If it's not, like most urban cities or sprawl cities, we're gonna get in our car and drive to the next little location, because it's just not indicative of walking. Or if you're downtown Ogden, you could park on 25th Street, you got 3 or 4 blocks you can walk, because there's so many things to do or look at and relate with. That's the end of mine, so I'll turn some time over to Lance, who will kind of go through the code itself.
All right, so the first slide I have here is similar to what Steve just went over, so I'm going to skip this one. Let me trying to make it full size. There we go. So we'll jump into, rather than go over what Steve just went through, jump right into the form-based code for Roy. So the first slide here is just talking about the thing you already know, which is that there's the station area and the downtown place types that are in the code. So because they're two much different characters, we've created two different zones for, or place types, excuse me, for those two areas. To talk about the downtown a little bit, as you can see here, the way that we wrote this code was to kind of figure out the vision for what we wanted to see in the downtown. So like Steve talked about, form-based code is about kind of organizing and defining around streets and public spaces. So we looked at the existing street grid, and it's kind of broken up. It's not really connected as much as it could be, as you would like to see in a good walkable kind of downtown area. So so that's what's shown here in this existing street network. And then we showed a list of potential street connections. These are just a demonstration of how you could connect with not a whole lot of streets, make a really connected grid, a much more walkable downtown area. Then you define, what we did was define primary streets. So what are the major streets that you want to have your buildings fronting? So here we have in the blue the primary frontage streets, and then because 2000 West has residential streets, residential uses on one side, we classify that as a residential frontage street, which I'll show you in the next slide. We have specific regulations in here to limit heights to be more sensitive to any parcels that would butt up against a current residential neighborhood or parcel. So for the station area, here we have a similar thing, although this becomes a much more odd-shaped neighborhood. This hardly has any streets kind of in the corridor of where the rail is. So what we've shown here is adding a few streets and orienting around the rail trail as well, so fronting the rail trail and having access behind on this red line right here as a way to organize, using the rail trail as the organizing feature in this long corridor. So this is actually the slide that shows that better, with this blue line being the rail trail. And then to go through so within each place type, there's a bunch of, in the downtown, there's 3 different zones. So the first zone is purple, is the most intense zone. This is, because it's pretty orphaned between Riverdale Road and 1900 West. It's, it's not close to any residential neighborhoods. It's, it's kind of separate. So this is where we've decided to put the best place for the most intense uses. And then, so here, it's got the most, the tallest building heights, up to 12 stories here. And then you can see here, yeah, you can see my cursor. It's, these are the building types that are allowed in this district. So the second zone is this dark blue color. This is kind of, we've kind of determined 1900 West and 5600 South to be the kind of heart of the downtown. And so this is not quite as intense of a corridor or of a zone, but similar to the purple area. And the building heights here are 10 stories maximum. However, that slide I showed you with the resident, anywhere it's near a residential parcel or neighborhood, you would have to still follow those requirements for abutting a residential neighborhood. And then the downtown general, this is the light blue area. This has maximum of 5 stories. It has a more flexible uses throughout more building types allowed, more flexible uses allowed in this area. And this, you're not going to be able to read this use table, but this is how, just, if you look at the code, how you can see which uses are allowed in each district. So in the station area, the red area is what we call the station area core. This has building heights up to 5 stories, mostly located in, down in the rail corridor, kind of the bottom where the rail corridor is currently. This area allows for, a storefront building, so that's like Steve was talking about, a shop on the ground level or some sort of retail or restaurant type of a use with residential above. A stoop building, which is just a residential kind of apartment building, or it could be office as well. Row buildings, so like townhouse, or any sort of civic buildings as well. In the orange, this is a maximum of 3 stories. So this is anywhere near where it butts up to the residential neighborhoods currently. As the mayor pointed out, this area right here, that's on the slope. So we've talked a little bit about this area. This is one of the more sensitive areas that we've tried to, keep down the height to 3 stories. And, work with the land, is, try to balance the need for, like the mayor talked about, trying to add, intensity and some density around the station, but be sensitive to the residential neighborhood as well. And then the Innovation District, this is similar to what's going on right now. It allows up to 6 stories. It, the intent here, I think, would be to still have a business use as the major use, but it would allow a mix of uses as well, which I don't think it currently allows there. So that's all for the overview of that. Any questions?
Council, any questions, comments?
Mayor, based on a lot of the information that's been presented tonight, there's a distinct difference between the 2 areas, the downtown and the station. I'm going to make a motion based upon that. I know you said no voting tonight, but this motion is actually to separate the 2. So as it comes back to us for a final vote, they will be voted on separately. Downtown will be voted on, and then the station area will be voted on separately. Because of the things that are going on, they're different zones, they're different areas. UTA doesn't have approval for a TOD yet, so we have time on that. We already have developers that are ready to move on 1900, and we need to move a little faster on that. We have time to vet through the train station area. I would imagine the majority of people that are here tonight are here to discuss the train station area. I'm not doing this to take away your voice. What I'm doing is, let's take the time, let's hear from you, let's make a decision of how we really want that to look. So I want to separate the 2 so we can move forward faster on the downtown area, where really we'll make the financial impact of the city with bringing in businesses and that. So my motion is we separate the 2.
Okay, obviously it's a recommendation, okay, since we're not basically voting on it, but what it can come out is that we can use this as a catalyst to direct the city to bring back to the city council a proposal to separate this form-based code into 2 separate entities. And then we treat them as 2 separate entities. But that has to be formally done, and it has to be formally voted on in a meeting. Talk to us a little bit, Andy, about how this may work or not work.
Here's how we'd have to work it. We can't give a recommendation to the Planning Commission. So, but we're gonna have to wait for the Planning Commission to take action. And
Okay.
then, once it gets to us, we can take that recommendation and we can divide that if we'd like to. We could put on our agenda exactly how the Planning Commission gives it to us, or we could treat it in the alternative to break that up.
Can't we direct the planning commission to
can't.
separate it before?
No.
Because they're going to vet through the whole
No.
process.
No, but we aren't, it really, Planning Commission's a separate body from us. Tonight really should be for informational purposes is what we're doing. And it may help me explain a little bit of something too, if I can go back
Please.
a little bit. Planning Commission held a public hearing several weeks ago, and at that point, they decided to table it. They continued and had a meeting last Tuesday night where in that meeting, it was a work session, so they had a discussion about it that time. And I think they gave an indication of what their recommendation would be. However, they can't give a final formal recommendation until they're in a regular meeting, not a work session. So Planning Commission will be meeting next week, and at that point, they will make a formal recommendation to forward to the City Council. So like I said, that, once that formal recommendation comes up, we can take that recommendation and we can set it up, we could put that, I don't know what they're gonna recommend, but we'll take whatever they've recommended. We can put that on the agenda, and we can put the other option too, because any council member can make a suggestion on how, an item they would like to see listed on the agenda. So I
Exactly.
think that's probably the most appropriate way.
So-
Well, Counsel,
So
what do you
Andy,
think?
my question is, if Mr. Paul is requesting that, is he making a suggestion that is okay to do in this meeting?
Yes, he's making a suggestion. And again, tonight, it's an informational.
But
I
he
think-
doesn't have to have a first and a second on that or a
No,
vote?
no. You can all discuss what you're leaning and what your thoughts are if you'd like at this point in time. But I do know that one of the points of tonight's meeting was the council needed to be educated on this, because this has been with the planning commission. The planning commission's been working on it for a long time. But the council hasn't really been formally introduced to what there is. So tonight was an opportunity to help educate the city council, so that when that recommendation comes to the city council will be prepared and, ready to move forward.
I was hoping through my motion that it would make it easier on them, because they could separate it and recommend it for approval
Yes.
separately.
And they may very well do that. They may very well, but at this point, we can't really.
Yeah, so what it comes down to is
But we can
what's your
check
thoughts on that idea?
I think that's a great idea.
I like,
Excellent.
So I'm hearing then, the majority of you feel like that's something we ought to probably do. We can look for the planning commission to see what they come back with, but if they don't, then we can basically prepare then for the next city council a decision to take this apart and address this as two separate entities.
And at that public hearing, one of the commissioners did actually recommend that, but then it was never fully voted on. And so,
Because it was a work session, is that correct?
because it was a public hearing, right? And so I think that it absolutely is an important idea.
Okay.
to be proceed with.
Okay? Any other questions that you might have in terms of form-based code at this moment? I know you just barely got the document. We're
Actually,
working through it.
I do.
Please.
go ahead.
I have 11 questions. I don't know if that's too many for now, or,
Diane, I think that's, for coming from you, I think it probably is short, so go ahead.
you're right, yeah, probably. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Glad to see you again, Lance. I know I was going to call you, but I waited for today. All right, on page 26, 4.211, it talks about residential, one or more dwelling units located within the principal structure of a lot. So what I understand that to be is that you could still just have one home there, but then on page 40, it says all buildings in whatever it is must be within that form. So what I hear you saying is any of these lots could have one home, but they would just have to be a square home with whatever that form is. They'd have to have the break line exactly the way it is. They'd have to be right up against the sidewalk if someone wanted a home in that lot. Is that what it says there?
So the building types that are, throughout the different
yes.
districts, that's what regulates the form of the building. So there, in the code, we don't currently have any for a single-family house. So it would be, the kind of lowest density would be a townhouse form. So you could build a townhouse, I'm trying to think, that's all by itself, and that's the form. So possibly you could do that. The intent is to not have a single-family house, though. It's to have, more of a.
It could happen, which might be nice for someone who owns that land. It's just that it would have to look like everything else there according to that code then, is that correct?
Yeah, it'd have to use one of the building types, so
Uh-huh.
so that's not ideal, obviously. If
So a single-family dwelling is not one of the one of the building
No,
types?
it's not a building type. No.
So it could not happen?
Well,
No.
it can
Well,
happen by this
It
code,
could happen in a
but it
weird-
just wouldn't, it would be a very limited style, whatever style they would have to limit to that.
No,
Yeah, it
he's
would be
saying
very
it could not,
odd.
because it's not one of the accepted uses.
It would be a very odd shaped building because
Mhm.
it's not what it's intended to do, so effectively it kind of rules it out, although you could possibly work around it, I suppose.
Okay. And then on page 26 also, just there on 2, it talks about the hotel and inn. It says the facility is limited to 12 rooms there at A. And then I just was wondering, we just had a hotel study done, and they are interested in 150 rooms, and I was just wondering how this would fit into the code.
So the, on the 2 where it says limited to 12 rooms, it's if a development standards apply, so if there's a D in the use list, then it's a development standard which is limited to 12 rooms. So I'm trying to find the,
So that would be downtown core B probably.
yeah, so where's, sorry, trying to get my bearings on here.
And if you could just go up to the top there, it says hotel and inn. On downtown
right.
core B, it says P, it
It's
says
right up top.
permitted.
Yep,
And so hotel and inn here has the limitation of 12. So I was just wondering.
yes, so,
That's in the downtown general, so that light blue, not the purple or dark blue. So if you
Well,
put
they're-
a hotel in that light blue,
so
that's where the
actually,
D is.
that's stationary.
Oh,
So-
stationary,
So-
never mind.
So then that means that the code would have to be amended if that were to go in. If the code was put in as written, then it would have to be amended to be able to allow that hotel?
In the stationary, sorry.
Yeah, only in that area. So in the downtown, it was, it's
It's a permitted use.
permitted use to have more than 12.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
great, okay. I
Well, so-
mean, it
so
says
you're
limited
saying
to
that-
12 rooms, so I was just wondering about that.
Only if there's a D in the
Great,
box.
okay.
So do you see
Okay,
where the?
yep, I
the
see
D
that.
is? Okay.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Yep.
And then on, let's see, we can maybe, let's go to page 44, please. And on page 44, I was just wondering if you don't mind double-checking some of the figures and the diagrams. I don't believe that they match up when you're talking about how B and C and stuff like that, and maybe you can get back with me later, especially like 5.51 on the building siding. So I don't believe that lines up. I think it's a different figure. But then I was just wondering, on the bottom corner of 44, under notes, it has number 2, and it says, if 18 feet or more in height, the ground story shall count as 2 stories towards the maximum. Then if we go up to that table and it says ground story, minimum height is 18 foot, and then just above that it says 3 stories. So what I think I hear it saying is that you have to have the ground story be 18 foot at least, which means 2 stories. You can only have 3 stories, and so what that really means is you would have the storefront type, and this is at the downtown area, and then you could have 1 residential floor on top. I just wanted to clarify that's what I was reading properly.
Yes, you are reading that properly. I do think that's a little weird and possibly a typo, because it's a little roundabout way to get to that. I will look at that and see if there's a more clear, obvious.
Okay.
I think it might be a typo.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for that.
And then I was on page 50, it talks about visible basement is only half the height of the tallest story. And then there are several areas that have very steep grades, especially in the station general. And so I was just, wondering how that was meant to fit in there, because some of those grades are so steep. I guess you'd have to backfill a lot. Is that what they had in mind, or on page 50?
Yeah, so typically with the visible basement, it's the provisions in here for, the standard place you'd see that is in like a townhouse where the ground floor is kind of, or the main entrance is up, a little ways, and the basement's half exposed, and you can have a different unit down there, so things like that.
You have to ask for an alteration or something on some of those codes then.
As far as I'm trying to think through the scenario that you propose, like on the slopes. This isn't designed necessarily for that, so let me get back to you on that one as
Okay.
well. Think through more of the ramifications and how it might affect.
All right. Great. On page 51, it just talks about if you have an enclosed porch, you can't have climate control, and I'm just wondering the principle of that and where that fits in, and that is on 5.9.5,
Yeah.
right there on page 51. If you just go up to write the words, just the words right under 5 where it says porch entrance types.
Okay, right there. Yeah, I see. Yeah, that's basically, it's kind of a very kind of a ticky-tack little thing in there. And the reason why it's in there is because sometimes people could call a porch, part of their house a porch. So the idea is that it's a true porch. It's not something fully enclosed and climate controlled. It's actually kind of an open air traditional porch.
So for people that might have a porch as part of their restaurant or something like that, it couldn't be climate controlled, is what it was my concern?
That's a good question.
And you can get back with me on
It's-
that. We have a lot of,
Yeah.
yeah,
this-
if you don't mind, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah.
And then on page 54, we talk about the historic palette of accepted colors. I have yet to find what that means, and historic palette. And again, if you can just let us know at some point in time what historic palette of accepted colors, it's referenced several times here. And then on page 55, if you just take a look at 5.11.2, 5.11.2, it talks about, the windows being recessed extensively. And you know what? I'll tell you what, let's just go to 55, 5.11.3, and it says only 40%, you can only have 40% balconies. And I was just wondering why only 40% balconies? Because as I've looked at other form-based codes, they have, some look very nice. They've got balconies around the whole, the whole floor, and it was I was just wondering why that would only be 40%.
Yeah, I'll take a look at that and see.
Okay.
The idea is just that you have a more dynamic kind of, it's not all one thing, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So 40% keeps it from
And then-
overpowering.
Okay, thanks for getting back with me on these. And then page 56, it says it requires only one theme. You can only have one theme. And I was just wondering how that came up. I've been talking to other cities across the nation about that sort of thing, and only having one theme and the pros and cons to that. And I was just wondering how that came out for only one theme for the whole area.
I can kind of talk on that.
Okay.
When the planning commission was first starting, the whole concept and idea of, what should downtown look like, a citizen came and says, I think it should be kind of an aerospace type because we have the museum, we have Hillfield sitting right there. So why not allow for metals, glass, that more around that theme rather than just some theme that doesn't really exist in Roy.
So maybe allow for, okay, well, that's something we can talk about later as the city council. I didn't even ask all 11, isn't that exciting? Okay, well, great, and thanks for getting back with me on those, and then we can go further on that. Thank you.
Brian? You had a comment, Brian?
Well, I have a question, actually. So the max on the Main Street, 1900 West development would be five floors? Is that what you're,
In the light blue.
okay.
So downtown, 5600 South and 1900 West,
We,
where the dark blue and the purple, it's 10 and 12.
10 and 12.
We figured as we go farther down the street, it becomes less intensive because it's, like most
So-
downtowns, it just kind of starts disseminating out.
So follow-up. You're looking at 5 stories with this station unless it abuts up against a residential, and then it's 3. So you're looking, and I'm just spitballing here, but you're looking at as large of an apartment complex down by the station as you could along your main street. So maybe that's why this room's full.
Well, again, the thought was, again, going through Senate Bill 34, when we adopted to, well, I can't remember what it said exactly about maximizing or looking at your station areas to have mixed use or moderate income housing. So the thought was, and most of it again was from Focus Roy, where it looked at this area that could be a mixed use to allow for those type of things. So when we looked at it, it says, okay, knowing topography and stuff like that, that's why the 5 stories came out, in between the walking trail and the tracks, and then along UTAs. When the planning commission was, again, starting out new, and we had people at a work session, they talked about, well, I live right there, I don't want, you know, a 5-story, 6-story right next to me. So the planning commission said, okay, well, we'll keep it similar in height, those areas that are right next to single family. So that's why the difference between 5 and 3. Now, if it ends up being that, great. If it ends up being something different, great. You know, if it's 2 stories next to the residential and 3 stories in between, you know, I think that's why I think Commissioner Paul, or Councilman, demoted you again. You know, Councilmember
Commissioner
Paul
Paul
had
at one point.
made mention that there's probably more issues with this than there is downtown, so let's look at separating it. So that's kind of where we started the process, and that's how we got here.
So we'll be able to come back
Yes.
to those heights.
Yeah, well, and I think that's the conversation we all need to have is
'Cause-
what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, where can it be this, or where should it be that?
And then the only other question, if we go 9, 10, 11, 12 stories on Main Street, I would assume that we've got the fire apparatus to serve such a
Most
tall
of those will probably have
structure.
to be sprinkled. I mean, again, Ogden City has those type, and they don't have apparatuses that can go up to those floors.
It's 7 foot, isn't it? Isn't ours up for 7 stories, I mean?
So, but again, as development comes, the fire department will have the ability to comment. So if you have an 8-story facility, we can only get 3 stories, you're gonna have to sprinkle it, you're gonna have to provide other things. But that's the fire code requirements, not necessarily a zoning code requirement.
Well, we
Like
should
all
consider
developments,
that.
the fire department's involved with all development.
Okay, other questions, thoughts?
Just at some point in time, I think we need to discuss snow removal, because, you know, the small alleyways, you know, are very small. Even the yield streets are only 18 feet. And so at some point in time, I just think that we really need to discuss that as we're planning.
Okay, let me just make it clear, council. You've got some ideas in front of you. At the end of the day, if we need to surgically change this to make it compatible, the council has the authority to do that.
But it
Because
has
when-
to officially come to us before we can do that.
But this is going to be worked over time. This is not a decision that's going to be made today, and it's not a good decision going to be made next week. But just recognize the fact is, ask the right questions, get the right information, get the public engaged in this conversation, and at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, if there are pieces that you do not believe you like, that doesn't fit this community, you think it because the community says it doesn't fit, then change it. Just change it. And we'll adapt this.
They have to change it, right? And we adopt.
Well, it'll be a change, but what you do is you direct the change, and then they will make that change happen, but the council.
Or we can accept it with modifications.
Or make the
Amend
modifications.
it
What I'd like to
1
do,
weeks.
as a council, I would like to go up there and suggest is, let's get it right the first time if it takes a little bit long, so that you don't have to come back and says, oh, we just approved it, now let's go amend it.
Well, I
Because
mean,
that-
when they present it to us, if we want to change it, we can amend it and vote on it right then.
You can change it, they're gonna present it, and once it's presented to the council, it's now the council's. It's not going back to the planning commission, it's ours. And our responsibility then is to ask the questions, get the input, look at the thing, listen to the public, and then simply says, you know what? I don't like this. This isn't gonna fit in Roy. Change it. What will fit? And if you don't like 12 stories, how about 6? Change it. That is what you have the authority to do. And when it's approved with all of what you want it to be, then it becomes law, and not until. But the beauty of this is you will then ask the right questions, we'll get the public engaged, and then we will get it right, and then we'll present it to the council for final approval. That's how it should be. Fair enough? Let's take the time.
So I have a little bit of a question on, it sounds like that we must do something to be in compliance with House Bill 34.
Well, my argument yesterday with a group of mayors was.
Hold
is
on
that-
just a minute.
I'm sorry.
Is there a timeline on that is my question.
The timeline says that by the end of the year, we have to put a moderate income housing report into the Department of Workforce Services.
Thank you.
Can I explain? What they'll, because the council already adopted those, the G and H scenario.
Right.
So December of this year, I have to report back to the Department of Workforce Services, what has the city done in this time frame to look at those items and bring it into code? So we've got some time. So even if, you know, to me, it's, say the front runner station takes a year to get through the process, so to speak, but downtown gets approved, my report would be, well, we created a zone that used to never allow or family residential units in it, now it does, so we're slowly going through it, so you won't be
Non-compliant.
deemed, so to speak, by UDOT.
Okay, that's my question. So we have quite a stretch of time.
Well, and hence why I recommend separating the two, so we can take the time to get through all their concerns, not only tonight, but in the future, but really try to move forward on 1900, where we have a hotel study, we've got people knocking on our door, we've got businesses that want to come in.
And then we could be in compliance with House Bill 34 in addition to that. Is
It
that
depends on what's proposed, but here's the beauty of this, and please don't misunderstand. The council does not build buildings normally. All you're doing is creating an environment that allows it to happen.
that.
If not a person walks into that train station over the next 10 years to do anything with it, if the environment by the city has been done, we are in compliance. We're in compliance. There's nothing we can do more than that.
We just have to take the steps.
We just have to work through that process to make sure we do it right. And as long as we're willing to do it right and do it right the first time, and whatever time that takes, if the answer to this is going to take us 6, 8 more months to get through the train station, let's take the time to do that. And then let's make sure that what we do right fits Roy. And then when it's done, then we're compliant to the level we can be compliant. And the fact of the matter is, if they don't change that law, let me make that clear. If they don't change that law, there's nothing going to happen in that train station.
No, but I think there are other parcels in that area that people are interested in.
Well, and they might be. But if you listen to what they're saying and you provide what appears to plan, and we put a plan that fits their needs, that fits the city's need, and fits UTA's needs, then it's ready. But there's no guarantees anybody's going to basically jump. We don't drive the jump. All we do is create the environment if somebody chooses to. And all we're saying is we just need to make sure the train station is in compliance with the law.
And the station area is only the area, right, that is in the yellow, gold, and
We have put that in the mix only because we have chosen to look at that. So here's the point I want to suggest is, the only thing the law says is that we can look at all that area for residential. UTA is the one that simply says, I will not build on my property, that's UTA-owned property, unless it meets a standard. They have a minimum requirement, they say. So we say this, and this is the logic. I like to take this to the trustees of UTA. Let's assume for a second we simply, okay, there's a lot on the furthest north part of that property right there. We'll put a 3-story in there. We'll do that. But everything else in there, we're going to put single family, we're going to put townhouses. And the argument is this: we can put and create an environment down there where they can have enough people who can simply make a choice that says, I think what we ought to do is I'm just going to walk to that train. I don't have to drive a bus. And that is their premise. Their premise is that if we can create an environment by which we have people who live close enough to walk to that train, we have done exactly what they expect. And we can do that in partnership with them. Because my concern is going to be is, and I'll be honest with you, hearing what I'm hearing what you're saying is, we probably are not going to put a 6-story building down there, okay? Ain't going to happen, even though UTA will say that. But I think we can say we can satisfy the law, satisfy UTA, we can do this right by looking at the broader community and say, is there something we can do so people who choose to want to buy a house down there or live down there can walk to the train station? That is what we have to sell.
So the station area, again, the question I'm asking, the station area that we have to address is only that area right around.
Just on the UTA property.
Okay, so again, if we separated that, that's not gonna help us at all, what we do uptown.
No. Because remember, there are three components to this, two components. There are three things that we had to declare within the law that basically said, that deals with downtown. There was only two things within that law that we had to choose, A or B, to deal specifically with the train station. So if we go up there to meet the law, simply says, hey, we can put a mixed-use development in the business corridor, we've met the standard. That's all we have to do. That's all we have to do. And remember, we're not gonna build anything. We're just we can put a code in place that allows that to happen. That's all we have to do, and we are compliant. And now the question is, I don't have to worry about the Department of Workforce Services simply saying that Roy City is not eligible for transportation investment funds. They can't, because we're there. We're getting compliant with our general plan. Now, it may not happen next year, it may not happen for 3 years, but we're moving in that direction, and that's all they can expect, and that's all we will have to do. So I think we're closer than we have. The only thing I'm asking, and I think we can do, and I think the recommendation I heard from this council would be is, if we break this out, give us time as a council, time as a community, to come up with something that's going to work, then let's take that time down that train station. And then the things downtown, let's work those. We have to work those anyway. And at the end of the day, I think we can make the right choice here. But there is a law, and we've got to maintain compliance with that law, unless it's changed. What bothers me now is, there's Senate Bill 39 coming, and you ought to read it.
So if we don't do something in a timely manner, though, can the UTA just go in and do what they want?
No, because they cannot build on their property unless the city zones it. They can't, and all that is zoned down there. I showed you a map. The only thing that is zoned for right now is RE8. That's 8,000 square foot, single-family homes.
But they would do a study on all that land, because like that looks so unstable, where all those, like you said, what happened in Riverdale. And it just looks so,
Can't do it.
yeah, I can't see anything being
No.
built there neither.
And interesting enough, there's 18 acres down there, and let's look at it practically. They got to have a parking lot for the people riding the train, because not everybody's going to live there.
Get rid of half of it and put in a two-story parking structure.
Well, they could do that if they want to spend the millions to do that, but they're not going to do that. And by the way, they can't do that unless you zone it. But I will tell you this, is that they have to have a parking lot, they have to have roads going in there. So when you narrow that down, even UTA will tell you today, if they looked at it, they'll never, ever consume that entire 18 acres down that they own. Never will. Because they just, by nature of its design, they got to retain some of that in play. So there's only a few pieces, in my opinion, down there that really is something we can talk about and look in terms of development to be compliant as far as UTA. All we're saying is this. If the community simply says this, you know what? I'd be willing and authorized to put some townhouses down there. Townhouses, okay? Doesn't quite fit what we're talking about. Well, we can do that. But it generates, those townhouses generates a population that can walk to that train station. Then I say you look at the whole thing and you say, hey, we've done that. We have provided that opportunity, and we can put townhouses in there. And by the way, by putting townhouses, you'll have the population, not on UTA property. Let me repeat that. It is not on UTA property. But it will create an environment by which people can simply walk to the train station. And if they walk and they meet that requirement, then UTA cannot argue the fact is we've done exactly what we need to do to increase their ridership, get people closer to the train station. It just won't be a 6 or 6 or 8 story building. It may very well be we just populate some type of a townhouse development. But what we have not talked about, which I suspect we're going to hear here, is we got owners down there that basically got light manufacturing. And it's their property. Do we leave it light manufacturing? You got to look at all that. The only piece that's holding us this here is only the UTA. Everything else is anything we want it to be. We've got a proposal. It's a good proposal. Let's just look at it, figure out what's right, and then if we have to make some changes to it, we can make the changes to it. We can do this.
I appreciate you standing up for property owners' rights, because sometimes it doesn't sound like that. So thank you. Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, please.
Just want to, just because I know Councilmember Jackson and Burrell's kind of concerned about the law and how we comply. Just by doing this, say we do nothing else and this takes a long time, we can say we are in the process of trying to get a mixed-use zone in these areas. That complies as well, because they're just wanting to know what's our progression to get to that point.
But we can change that mixed use
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
stipulations before we accept that.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that correct?
Oh, yeah.
So just the legalese of Senate Bill 34 in December, when I have to make the report, we're in the process of doing it, and that satisfies the law as well.
So we're really I mean, we can get there from here. We just need to do this smartly, okay? I'm pretty excited. So, okay, having said that, council, any other questions, comments before we go into public comment period? Okay, here's what we'd like to do, if you don't mind. I know you have topics you'd like to bring up. Please don't hesitate to join us. We're going to go now into the public comment period. All I ask would be is, would you step up to the mic, just give us your name and give us your address, share what you would like to share with us.
Leon Wilson at 4302 South, 2675 West in Roy. Mayor and council, I have 4 points I'd like to address and a couple questions at the end, if I may. Point number 1 is titled, "Posted and published does not equal informed and notified." Okay? The law requires public meetings to be posted and published by relying on this standard. I believe that standard falls far short of the intent of the law, which was to inform and notify. I hope we can learn from our recent experiences and improve the process. Rather than flying at roof height, let's soar 10,000 feet when it comes to informing the public. And Mayor, I appreciate you sending your list around. I think that's the first step, and there's several more to go. I had no idea what form-based was until I received a letter from the city on January 3rd, announcing a public hearing and proposed vote with the Planning Commission on January 14th. The room was packed and considerable opposition was voiced. I'll briefly review the timeline when citizens were notified about this document. And I think it's really important that we understand what's gone on a little bit behind the scene. I have listened to many recordings and read all the agendas and minutes of the Planning Commission for the past 2 years. It's a riveting read. You need to try it sometime. I really highly would recommend that for a cure for insomnia. Anyway, the beginning of the physical document. Okay, I'm talking about the physical document, not the content, okay? Started 1 year ago on January 22nd with a joint session of the City Council and Planning Commission where contractors were announced. On April 9th, Mr. Parkinson, our Roy City Planner, reported to the Planning Commission that he had received a copy of this document, known as FBC. So from now on, when we're talking form-based code, it's going to be abbreviated by FBC. And everywhere you look, it's now become FBC. The only information or education about FBC, as far as I've been able to uncover, was at a booth in August at Roy Days. And I'm sorry, I was harvesting and I didn't have time to go play at the park, okay? The first city notification, this is the first city notification of FBC was posted for the September 24th Planning Commission. Even if you had read the paper or saw it on the city website, it would not have meant a thing to most people. We had no idea what FBC meant and how it would impact us. The following is from the minutes of September 24th from the Planning Commission. Quote, "The commission was concerned that the residents wouldn't respond well to the lack of density limitations in the code. They asked if staff had calculated how many units could potentially go into these areas. Mr. Parkinson said that he had not calculated density. Rather than being focused on use, the FBC would focus on aesthetics." Here's the important part. Mr. Parkinson agreed that they would hear a lot of concerns from residents. There was some discussion about educating the public on the purpose of form-based code. It was suggested that they pursue education through social media, newsletter, and public meetings. After September 24th, the legal notice of FBC was given 3 more times on 10/8, 10/22, and 11/12. And all it was the notation of form-based code in the paper, okay? In fairness to the Planning Commission, they all did not receive their copy of this form until September 10th, okay? And then they received a presentation from the contractor, IBI, on October 22nd. Now, what does all these figures and have to mean? Okay, what does this mean? The public has not had the opportunity to be educated on form-based code and what it means. And that's 2, the public has not had no input upon the public hearing on January 14th. In other words, we have been kept in the dark, as far as I'm concerned, up till January 14th. Even after acknowledging on September 24th that there would be a lot of concerned residents, nothing material to inform and enlighten the public has been done. So, what's held up this document from being disseminated from the time that Mr. Parkinson received this on April 9th, or when he reported having received this, to September? Why was there only one public hearing a couple weeks ago? There seems to be an excessive delay facilitating public dialogue. That concerns me big time. Point 2, I've titled Concerns Regarding How the FBC Will Be Administered. Now, I'm aware, I've read a good share of this. On page 96, it says that there will be a creation of a development review committee. And this review committee is a technical committee that will pre-screen and review at the contractor's whatever they're going to approach, which I think should be called, anyway, the newly created zoning administrator, which I think should be called the zoning czar, heads and may appoint the committee. After approval, the plan is forwarded to the Planning Commission for final approval. The Planning Commission has already said, get this is really interesting and gleaning this out of the notes. The Planning Commission has already said they don't want to be over FBC. Quoting from their minutes, the commission said if they could require the staff, they were questioning Steve. They said, Steve, could we be exempt? Now, let me just quote it. If they could require the city staff to be responsible for approval of areas in the FBC and Planning Commission for the rest of the city. They wanted to divorce themselves from administering this. Even if they did accept, and when I say they, even if the Planning Commission did accept this responsibility, this is the composition of the current Planning Commission, collectively speaking now, must be enhanced to fill this role. We could sure use, folks, a few more volunteers that have some experience in urban design, civil engineering, a few landscape architects, investment bankers, realtors, contractors who are willing to serve. Currently, as the code reads, this council would be out of the loop. I'm sure that could change, but the way it reads now, you're not going to be the political body that decides what goes in where. Once this is approved, you have to fly with it. Anyway, now, I want you to know, I truly respect those who sit in front of me. In fact, I love one dearly, okay? But shepherding this process for the long haul, and frankly, even in the short run, could be fraught with political problems. Now, 5 years ago, Mr. Whitchurch and Mr. Tyrell from IBI sat in front of the South Ogden City Council, okay, in a very similar capacity to discuss form-based code. Yesterday, I spoke with a city council member from South Ogden who has served for years and was one of the leading proponents. Well, South Ogden adopted form-based code, and just to cut things short here, things have not gone in South Ogden as she had hoped or had planned, okay? I don't have time to elaborate, but I think it'd be well worth discussing that conversation down the road. Okay, the next 2 points are really quick. Sorry to hold you guys up. Title III has already been discussed, and it was my thought, just as Joe Paul has suggested, that downtown and station be divided. So I'm gonna go right into 4. The last point is titled remove my property from form-based code and free my soul. Okay? Here we go. Wait a minute, hang on. I am not developing this property, my property, for decades. So why incur the considerable objection to this form-based code now? What are we going to gain? Okay, this is my retirement. That 10 acres is basically my 401k, okay? Including my property without my consent, I believe, is exceeding the role of government. In fact, FBC, in essence, exercised a form of eminent domain. Although not forced to sell, I'm unable to make changes to my property unless conforming to this form-based code. It severely restricts my vision, my dreams for my property, okay? My legacy is my property. I don't have kids. And how it is developed will speak volumes for what I stand for. Thank you for your time, folks.
Okay, thanks. Okay, name and address. Thank you.
I'm Byron Burnett. I live at 4375 South, 2675 West. Just for background, I did go to the booth at Roy Days, and they had pictures that were scary, just like we've heard today. And at that time, they were asking for feedback to the landmark design team. So I wrote a letter with my concerns because I didn't think mixed-use form-based code was good anywhere. It was a catch-all, build anything you want here, making it easier for developers to walk in and without going through the process of changing any zoning. So I didn't, and I, at the time, sent a letter to a landmark design team and to Mayor Andoy, and I appreciated, he had a response to me in one day, and I appreciate that. I've attended planning commission meetings since then. I've planned, one planning meeting was not very friendly meeting about the building, the proposed down there by the Bridge Academy with the townhomes and the senior center. And I opposed that not necessarily because of the proposal, because I didn't actually think that would look too bad. I did it because they were going for this mixed use, anything goes housing that I just can't support. I've received State Bill 34 and I reviewed it myself. I met with, at a hometown meeting with 3 of our representatives, and I asked them specifically questions about it. I attended the planning meeting on the 14th, which wasn't, we probably gave them 2 hours of really good information, I felt like. It wasn't just complaining, it was, we had ideas and we shared those, and they listened, and one of the commissioners proposed separating the downtown station, and it ended there, and they, instead of doing anything there, they tabled it. And they invited us to attend their meeting in 2 weeks. We wanted to take part in it. Well, that first thing that happened in that meeting was we were explained that we can't say anything in those working meetings. So we couldn't say anything, and so the first few minutes of that was us being taught the rules that we just have to be there and be quiet. And then there was no discussion about any item we brought up for 2 hours. And then they voted to send it on to the council. So I'm a little confused why you don't have it now. Because the sooner you get it, the better, because we have a planning commission that didn't address one issue we brought up, so obviously doesn't listen to the community, and we were told they're a different group, and they're just looking at legalities and those things. My takeaways, I've read the 110-page or whatever it is proposal, and I've read State Bill 34. My takeaways are, after talking to Representatives Perry, Schultz, and Musselman, that those penalties would never come into play. They would impact other cities. If you impacted 5,600, Midland 1,900, you're penalizing Hooper, Midland, the king of very high density now, West Haven. That's who you'd be penalizing as much as Roy. And so I don't believe there will be any penalties. And then I asked them, okay, let's go back and say, I said, do townhomes qualify? Would they satisfy the station requirements in State Bill 34? And all 3 of them admitted that 2-story townhomes would satisfy State Bill 34 around the Front Runner station. One of them went on to say he's pretty high on apartments. I'll give him that. And of course, he's an apartment owner. But so State Bill 34 in my mind is not an issue. The second one was this residential infill overlay that I've talked about before, and I find out that requires an application. So that really protects from a new development or development of residential, to protect from exactly what you're trying to do. Go right in the middle of this residential and build 5-story, very high density buildings. Well, that only applies to those new homes because they did do an application. So those 70 homes on the south end do have this, and they should be protected from all of a sudden next to their 70 new homes that aren't yet built on streets that certainly aren't built for through traffic into hundreds of apartments that are proposed 5-story high, very high density going through their neighborhood. That's just not what they probably signed up for, because that would be a nightmare for traffic. On my street particularly, the last 20 homes, if this proposal worked, they proposed 3-story or very high density to the east of us, and that goes up a hill on Wilson's property. So it wouldn't just be 3-story, it would be starting up about 10, 15 feet and then going 3-story on our east side. On the north side it'd be 3-story, and on the west side it'd be 5-story, with us and just our street and the tracks between those, with the noise going back and forth with the trains, taking away our views and taking away our privacy. I don't know who does that to long-term residents. I can't believe I can't believe a planning commission would do that to long-term residents. And ignore it when brought up to them. Traffic, I won't address traffic because I think you did a good job with that. Mayor, we already have traffic problems. And if you go in there with very high density with hundreds of apartments and you got 2 intersections out of that on 4,000 and 4,800, it's already a difficult intersection on 4,800. 4,000 might be even more difficult with the increased traffic. When you talk about affordable housing, I went down to West Haven. They're building 400 homes on 40 acres, 10 homes per acre. And their selling point is on these homes that are 1,400 to 1,800 square feet is that you can move into these homes and it's cheaper with property taxes and sale, and you can invest your money, and it's cheaper and more affordable than the apartments that they're building right to the west of them. 268 apartments, new apartments, that are anywhere from $1,100 to $2,000 per month. And then you're investing and you're bringing in people investing into the community instead of renting into our community. And they'd be perfect, you know, townhomes down there or homes on smaller lots would be perfect for these 2,500 new jobs coming into North Grumman, the Roy Hill Air Force Base. It'd be a draw for them to work close by. I've got kids and grandkids right now, and I'd rather have them investing in something like that than building very high density rentals. The turnover rate when we have one of the big apartment owners in West Haven are like, even though the leases are a year and 15 months or 18 months, the turnover rate average about 7 or 8 months that they're going through those apartments. And they are, we need to find a way to help young people qualify for loans, because in the long run they're cheaper and they're investing their money, and they start investing in our community, in our recreation programs, in our schools. They're not just a, hey, I'm here for 8 months, see you later, I'm going someplace else. There's nothing in the bill that says you have to have very high density. To jump clear to very high density, 5 stories is ridiculous to around that front runner stage. There's just better ways to do it. It's just wrong there. This whole thing's wrong in a residential neighborhood. Downtown, I'd say go for it. So I read it. I didn't think it was a good idea downtown. I read through it. You know, it's interesting. And if you separated it out, I wouldn't oppose that. I wouldn't be sitting out here opposing it, because I've read through it and I think, you know, if you can make this work, go for it, I guess. I have my doubts because we're not Gateway and we're not downtown or the Junction or those kind of places, but at least you're not hurting the residents. The other thing I want to talk about is the residents' message to leaders. This isn't a problem in Roy. It's all up and down the Wasatch Front. It's causing problems. It's a hot button issue. It's in West Haven. Just a quote from the Standard Examiner. Indeed, local officials across Weber County have wrestled with fast, high-density growth. It's been a particularly heated issue in fast-growing West Haven, where voters last November elected 3 new city council members who campaigned on getting a better handle on the issue. More closely manage such expansion. Critics there worry fast development harms the country feel and appeal to the city. Residents of South Weber had a couple of changes in their council, I understand, over the same issue, and we had some really pretty strong feedback for the commission and the city council, just with the one down on Midland in our last meeting on the 14th. So I say go for it on downtown. The Innovation District is going to be nothing left after you build 6-story on the runway. I think you're done there. And I will say that the Roy Station is unique because there's only 2 that are in the middle of residential neighborhoods. I think the other one's Woods Cross, and I don't think they've done anything down there either. It's just different than the other stations. You can't compare it with the other stations and say we're going to do the same thing everybody else does. You know, my kids used to say that, too. Everybody's doing it. My kids used to say that, and it wasn't right back there either, back then either. And so I just say it's the wrong thing to do in a residential area. I say we stay residential. Very worst we should do is 2-story townhomes, which you could build a really nice neighborhood of 2-story townhomes, and you'd probably, I know you'd satisfy State Bill 34, and I think you could satisfy many of us residents. So.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate your comment. Okay. Name and address.
Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the council, my name is Taurus Brand. I live at 6019 South, 3850 in beautiful downtown Roy. And for the record, I am on the Planning Commission. I am here tonight as a private citizen exercising my right of free speech. I have not spoken with anyone on the board. I've had no conversations about showing up here tonight. These opinions or these statements that I make are mine and mine alone. First thing I'd like to say, Mr. Mayor, is thank you for your comments. I am sure there are people in this audience that learned things tonight, including me, that we didn't know before. And I also want to say to Councilwoman Wilson, you ask more and better questions than our board has in the past year about this form-based code. We have not fleshed it out. As Mr. Wilson stated, at the meeting, the first meeting of this month, I believe it was on the 14th, we had quite a crowd. They had lots of things to say. We learned lots of things. We had a brand-new chairman that night. He read a statement at the beginning of the meeting that said the commissioners were not going to talk to them. We were not allowed to do so. I know it surprised me because I've been the chairman for the last 2 years. That was a brand-new policy for that first meeting. I looked over at Mr. Flint, our counsel, and he was sitting there going, do I say something or do I not? Well, he used good discretion. He didn't say it. But later on, at the second meeting we had, he came and told us what the law was, which is we have every right, in fact, an obligation, to engage with the public to find out what their concerns are. Thank you, sir. However, at that same meeting, an antiquated policy that we have that runs our planning commission, that again was passed by a prior chairman, basically says that we're not allowed to talk to you at a working meeting, and you're not allowed to talk to us. The only person that can answer your questions is the city planner. Well, the meeting is not the city planner's meeting. Even though if you were there and you saw how the room was laid out, the room was laid out with the city planner sitting where Mr. Dandoy is, the chairman of the commission with his back to the audience, and the audience behind there. That was not, if anybody doesn't know, it looks like it's the city planner's meeting. That was a planning commission meeting. I was blindsided that we voted. Okay, I was not in favor of voting. I did in fact vote yes because it was 6-1. I also support separating the two different form-based codes. I think it makes really good sense. And I appreciate the suggestions that you have made that what we should be doing is listening to the public more. You are unable by law to direct us on how we handle our meetings. Every planning commissioner is appointed by the mayor with concurrence of the council, and we're set up as an independent entity. There's no direct management by the council or by the city employees. So thank you for suggesting that we talk to people, we find out what their concerns are, we flesh this out, and I think we can make a better decision when we send it back up to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Name and
My
address.
name is Bill Norseth. I live at 4389 South, 2525 West. Eventually, this 2525 West is going to go south, or north, excuse me. And then it's going to be a main thoroughfare. We can't control the speed on that hill from 2500 to 4670 or 2675. My God, you ought to try backing out of that driveway in the morning some days, or in the afternoon about 3 o'clock. Those people, it's supposed to be 20 miles per hour with warning. but I'll bet you the average speed is right around 45. And you better be damn quick getting out on that road. You don't want to dally out in the middle. And when it becomes the main road going back into those apartments or whatever in the heck they're gonna build over there to the north of me, 'cause I'm on the edge, I've had 2 cars hit my house. I had 1 car end up in my shrubs. The neighbor, this was a few years back, and then the neighbor last year had 2 cars through his yard. So it's going to be a joke. And what are we going to do with the traffic when they build all this to the north of us? I guess we're going to have to start walking to town because we don't dare take our car out of the garage. Then the second question that I wanted to comment on, we got a senior center over there on 4,000 east of the tracks, north of 4,000. I don't know whether any of you have ever stood by a railroad track when a mile-long freight train goes through. That ground just goes like this. We'll shake that right off the foundation. And then I'd look at it, and if I lived in a ghetto, I wouldn't want to live next to it, 'cause that's a terrible-looking junky thing. It looks like a bunch of boxes that the railroad threw off and somebody stacked them up. It's pitiful. And that ain't gonna last and then when they get all these places built west of the tracks, who in the heck is gonna build that wall for noise? 'Cause those trains are not quiet. The people here, or the planning commission might think so, but they sit in an office. They have no idea what that train does. I do. Thank you.
Thanks for your input. Thank you. Okay. Name and address. Thank you.
Some of you know me as Santa, but otherwise my name is Lee R. Holt. I live at 2626 West, 4225 South. Moved in there about 12 years ago. Just to give you a little background on me, so in my comments, I've thought this thing through. I've been in this town over 50 years. I'm a retired real estate broker, developer, contractor, certified property manager by national license, and an appraiser. So I'm here to tell you that I can't even conceive of this concept of dense housing against those tracks and against that pathway. We have in the appraisal business, we have what we call soft development, highest and best use. If I was to be paid $5,000 right now by some developer's bank to do an appraisal, it would come out as storage units, period. Never gonna last as 2, 3, 4, 5-story townhouses. They're not really townhouses, they're apartments. So we're going to the low economic sector, and demographic studies will tell you that increases your crime rate. Demographic studies tell you that if they're going to have 1 parking spot per unit, all the tenants will have 2 cars. So they will pack that second car all along 4,000. They'll rob from the front runner parking lot, etc., etc. Also, as we go up 4,000, which I do every day, and we hit that long train he was describing, and we sit there. Can you imagine all these density house members coming out of 4,000 right next to that auto shop trying to get on 4,000? That is called, and I've seen it, and I've had to sign off on a study on it. And by the way, I was chairman of the Roy Planning Commission for many, many years. But I've seen a study on it, and it's road rage. So you're going to come out of there onto 4,000 on a street right in front of that railroad track. No way. what else do I have to say here? And I appreciate all the comments, especially this last gentleman about that dirty train. So there'll be massive violation of parking, loss of view. I live on that pathway, so I'm just west of the pathway. So now we're gonna have these multi-story apartment buildings looking right over our yards and our lives. And then the ability for them to jump a fence and come into my house. Sorry to say. Anyway, my recommendation is no way, and let's do passive development. Storage sheds or something along those lines. That is soft traffic, it is soft development, and it's soft crime. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for your input. Thank you. Name and address, thank you.
I'm Eddie Walter. I live at 5570 South, 2050 West. When the Planning Commission sent out the letters about this, I never got one. A neighbor notified me, so I came to the last planning meeting. The gentleman running that meeting, in my opinion, was just a little short of a dictator. And the other people there were trying to appease the public. So I think you need to do something with your planning commission. But I also think that you don't go in and do stuff behind people's back. And that's what you're looking like you're doing. Now, you need to separate that track project in downtown. My concern as a Roy citizen, Tad, to those people that live there, that's all sand hills. And whatever goes down there is going to keep going towards the lake at some point. So you need to consider that. But what concerns me is up here. I bought my house in 1982 with the fact that when I got to this age group, that I take away my license, I could go get the mail and buy some groceries. And there were stores up here, and a person could get around. There isn't now. We got a whole bunch of fast food restaurants and Chinese restaurants and car washes, which don't do much to help anybody survive. I think if you're gonna develop this, you need to do it with mind that you wanna do that multi-use that people can get around. We can't go buy clothes in this town. The bus runs up here, but for most of Roy, you can't get on a bus. So you talk about UTA, they better fix up, or somebody better make bus routes available if you want people to quit driving. I can't get out of my neighborhood for the traffic around here, and everybody knows it. So until you can address fixing the traffic, you better not put a bunch of high-density stuff here where nobody can get around, where it's almost impossible now. So I think those things ought to be addressed and fixed before you start doing some of these other things. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Name and address, thank you.
It's Adam Sockwell, 4298 South, 2675 West in Roy. So I appreciate all the comments and all the education that I've had here. My question is, given the whether, well, number one, I oppose the high density. I'm not opposed to townhomes in those areas. I would like single dwelling homes, but you know, given the fact that what we have to work with, I would go with townhomes. So the question is, as we grow, are the schools prepared to handle the growth? Like, do we have a plan in place for more teachers? It's North Park. North Park's right there in Valley View, mainly those ones. And maybe possibly Lakeview, right? Is there a plan for new educators to come in? Like, 'cause I feel alright, Utah already has like a shortage of teachers. Is this gonna cause an issue? And is it been addressed? So this is kind of just my question.
At this moment, to be honest with you, we have not addressed this with the Weber County Superintendent. But your point is that anytime you do any type of development, there is in fact going to have, particularly with children, if you're targeting families, there's going to be an impact. And but to answer your question is we have not done that. Recognizing that the council's only seen this for basically 7 days, we think that's something that also has to be pursued. Because there will be impact if a decision goes forth to do more residential or even high-density residential, as you defined it. So it's all going to have to be play out. We have to flush all that out. We've got to see what the impacts, traffic, education, those resources, they have to be worked.
Okay.
So
I'll
good
just
question.
Make sure that was on the table, going to be addressed, because that could be an issue. So thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for your input. Please, name and address.
Charles Ivester, 4299 South, 2675 West. A couple of things. Number one, let's split it into 3 sections. Downtown, tracks, and get Wilson's property off of it. It ain't ours to play with. If we start going into higher density areas, we're looking at a lot. I mean, I own a trucking company, and I'm not allowed to park my trucks in my own damn city. I have to rent in West Haven. But you're wanting to put in shops and stuff down here. You want Cisco, US Foods, Children. I mean, obviously, all the residents aren't gonna want them trucks in there 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to deliver. Now you're getting big trash containers. Oh my God, in July, it smells so bad. Well, you bought the house next to the market. So you're gonna have all these code violations, ordinances, all this other stuff that's gonna govern all this, plus heavy truck traffic coming in and out that we're already not prepared for. I mean, I just happen to know some of the streets that I know I can get away from. When I-15 breaks down, I know that I can come around, and thank God there's 2 big turnabouts down here that I can actually get my trucks around to get back around the freeway. Long story short, it's just, and are we considering putting in another firehouse on the other side of the tracks? Trains break down, something happens, high density populations, you've got to get the fire equipment to them. Ambulances, police cars, even the new establishment that we just have just on the other side of the tracks on 4800 South. I watched a Roy City cop right in front of me. I was on my way down to Weininger's to go to the bank. Very little traffic. Unified Police comes right out of his neighborhood, flips an illegal left turn right there after Roy City. If he looked in his mirror, he's not gonna help another agency get busted. I don't want to rag on our police. These guys are amazing. They really are. Quick responders. I call, Weber County Dispatch. If there's some suspicious vehicle at the end of our dead end at 2675, these guys are here in a heartbeat. But I do see some of them blowing through even the crosswalk up here on 4400. There are several of them I've watched do it. It's just one thing's going to compound right on top of another. So, appreciate your time.
Thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else would like to make comment? Thank you. Name and address?
My name is Richard Dunlap. I live at 4623 Trailside Drive. And I want to thank you guys for listening to us today. And I know that you guys do listen to us. I can thank the mayor himself for coming to a meeting at my home a while back. So I know you are listening to us, so I appreciate that. We bought our home there and hoping that we want to retire and live out, hopefully live out the rest of our days there. And the thought of development is kind of scary to us. And so, in general, I'm in agreement with most of what's been said here today, as far as keeping that development over by the station to a minimum. It would be, it may be, in my opinion, be nice to have something that I can, some sort of place to go shopping, but not in a very low impact sort of way, not a major grocery store or something like that. I did want to say, we already, as far as low income housing, if you think about it, there's already some low income housing right within walking distance of the train station that's been there for decades. And that's the trailer courts right there. And with a little bit of imagination, you could make that, you could leverage that effect even more. So that's something to think about. Right now, they don't have an access through the back. I don't know if that's in the cards, but it's just something that I have thought about. As far as the form-based construction, I don't want it to be thrown out completely with the bathwater, because we're talking about reducing traffic, and I think the thought behind this form-based construction is, in fact, reducing traffic, because if somebody can walk to a store that's just down the stairs, they don't need to go get in a car somewhere. So let's think about that. Let's think about what is the overall intent. The devil's in the details, of course, because we want to make sure that there are codes that are going to protect us, but and that's up to you guys. But I just wanted to lay that out there. My kids and a lot of kids today aren't interested in cars as much as we looked forward to our driver's license as a rite of passage, and my 18-year-old looks at driving as a burden. And so think about that, because we want to do something that I, for one, want my kids to stay close. And if they don't have what they need here close by, they're going to go move to Salt Lake, they're going to go move somewhere else where they can have what they want. So I don't know the details of the form-based construction, but let's not throw the baby out with bathwater. And that's all I got to say.
Okay. Thank you for your input. Hi.
Kathy Rogers,
Thank you.
4376 South, 2675 West. I had quite a few concerns. We received the notification, just like Leon Wilson had said. We felt like we had been in the dark, and that was the first we had heard of it. And I have concerns as a mother for children that are in junior high and high school. My daughter already tells me now that there's too many kids as it is, and that she doesn't always get to ask the questions that she wants to ask. She has to stay, which is fine, but sometimes she can't, or sometimes the teacher just can't stay. And so my concern was for the education, like Adam Sockwell had said, that the teachers and how many kids, and also the traffic. I know that's been addressed, but the traffic is going to be a lot worse, and also the crime. And also, I took care of my parents for over 10 years. I took them back to Mississippi to bury them because that's where I'm originally from. Well, where are my kids gonna bury me? Because Roy is full. So that's a concern.
Can I make a
And
comment? We're working on that,
I
but
hope-
please.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I'm glad you are, because that was a concern. That when my parents passed away, that I took them, it just moved me on up to the line. That, you know, and you have to think about that. So, and I love Roy. We chose here because it was a smaller town community, and it felt like, sorry to say, but Andy Griffith. You know, everybody cares about everybody. And if I wanted to live in Salt Lake, I would have picked Salt Lake. So I appreciate you guys addressing things. And I was at those council meetings for the planning, and I just have to say, I felt like I was in the dark. I felt like they didn't want to hear anything I had to say. I felt like you can be seen but not heard from. And I felt like I was being told that, well, we have to do it this way. Too bad. So I just want to say that as a citizen, that I felt like my opinion did not matter in those meetings. So, thank you.
Figured we'd tag team because we're the same address. I agree with what my wife is saying. I agree with a lot of what people have been saying here. We didn't choose to move to Roy to be like Salt Lake City. We're a unique community. We want to keep that community feel. I love what Adam Sockwell said about the schools, and I know that's not a decision this committee makes, but the decisions that we do make affect other things that have to do with our community. I don't like the blanketed effect that we're having with this form-based code, because you guys have a difficult decision to allow what can be, if we change these codes now. I was told at one of the planning committee meetings that one of our biggest gripes, I guess, when we first heard about this was, you're taking away our view. That's important to us. As homeowners, we kind of bought that house to sit on my porch and look out that west view. It's a gorgeous view. I was told the view has nothing to do with the decision, and that's right. I understand that. We're going to develop that area. I understand that our view can be taken away. My concern and what was told to me during that planning committee meeting was that it's really up to the developers that come in and buy that land. Once you guys decide to change the zoning, they really could go with whatever they recommended in those new zoning areas. So my view could be destroyed. That's fine, to a degree, but he was talking about making this multi-use and moderate housing. My son is getting married right now. They can't even find anywhere from Layton north that's under $1,200. How are we going to keep our people here, our kids here in this area? I don't know, because according to that statement, if that developer comes, if I go and buy that parcel of land and I put 26 apartments in there, and I want to charge $2,000 a piece, it's no longer moderate. It's high density and high cost. We're not going to keep our youth that are going to school here making 13, 14 bucks an hour. They're not going to be able to stay here because they can't afford it. I know that because I got 5 kids of my own, and guess where they're all living? In my house.
In your house, yeah.
Another concern we have this year has been a really fun, or last year has been a really fun year for us. We've had 4 floods in our home. 4 times we've replaced our basement. How are we, and when we look at this and we start bringing high density housing into that area, how's our infrastructure going to handle all that? I don't want to replace my basement anymore, so I would appreciate that gets looked at as well when we start looking at doing this stuff. I appreciate your time. I really appreciate some of the comments that you've made to us today, Mayor. It makes me feel a little bit better that we aren't going to try to fast track this. So thank you for those comments.
Okay. Hey, thank you for your input.
Thank you.
Name and address, thank you.
Jacob King, 4396 South, 2675 West. I just want to touch base on what most of the commenters have, but I also wanted to add to just food for thought. with everything is investment, not only into the properties, but the properties around them that exist already. I can only go off of my own experience right now, but the wife and I had a conversation last year about what we want to do. Do we want to move? Do we want to stay? And then we eventually decided we wanted to stay.
Okay.
We like Rutep, we like Roy, we like the proximity to businesses and everything like that. We like the location, we like the people, everything about it. So, and this is just us, so we're decided to invest in our home. Took out a $30,000 loan, that money's sitting right there. We're getting ready to do a huge addition to our house. Until we found out about this. Now that money's on hold. We were getting ready to start this process around May this year. Not even gonna touch it now, not until we at least have a good idea of what's going in across the tracks from us. And the reason I bring that up is that's just something to keep in mind. It's not only our home, is are we going to dwindle other people's investments in their homes in the area? Are they gonna wanna stay, or are they gonna say, no, this is just getting too dense, my views are gone, it's getting too crowded, traffic's too bad, they move out. Next family moves in, they don't wanna invest as much either, just because it just keeps decaying. So that's something I just keeps running across my mind, is just the effect, not only on this specific area, but as a whole, in the whole area there. And I mean, other people touch crime and infrastructure, all these things like that, but that's investment, is in my mind. The house next to me, that's already been invested in. They remodeled the whole house, sold that off. That was great. The one right here did the same. We're just about ready to do the same thing. We're not selling, but we're about ready to improve that property. Definitely not doing that now until we have an idea. And like other commenters says, townhomes, things like that, something small, we're fine with. We'll still stay because we don't want to go anywhere. But multi-level, 5-story or whatever, it's not going to be our bag. That's not what we moved here. We've been here for about 10 years. We love it. We don't want to be living in that proximity to those bigger buildings. Downtown, I think, is a great idea, but where we're at is stationary.
Okay.
And that's about all I have. So.
Thank you. Thank you for your input. Okay.
Thank you.
Please, name and address.
Glenn Jacobson, 4170 South, 2400 West, Roy. I've lived in Roy since I got married, 43 years ago. We lived in the south end of town for a long time and then waited until they built the subdivision out just east of the train station. And we built on the edge of the hill, knowing that we'd be there the rest of our lives. We love Roy. And we felt like we got sold a bill of goods when they brought the train station in. We built there knowing that, single family dwellings behind us. And, we'd be able to see the sunsets every night. But besides all of that, there's some questions I don't think have really been answered. Has UTA talked to or made any communication with UDOT on what's really going to happen on 4,000 with the increased traffic? Everybody knows that 4,000 is a mess now. Roy has one overpass over the tracks. How many's Clearfield got? They got 4 or 5 now. I think it's kind of a travesty. And we've always been told, well, UTA's dictating all of that. I feel like we're getting dictated way more than we should be. This is our community. Let's keep it our community. You put in high-density housing, and sure, they want to put shops underneath. Who's going to shop in those shops? The people upstairs? Okay, so what's going to go in there? Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks? It's not a destination. You're not going to get a Macy's in there. You're not going to get something that, was going to bring a lot of people in. And is that what we want anyway in that area? Yeah, there's business could go in there, but what are they going to be? And where are the people going to park at those businesses? There's not enough parking designed for the residents that live upstairs. Where are these people gonna park that are gonna shop there? I don't think this has been thought through enough. You know, let's build some townhouses that have some decent parking and add to the community, because it's members of the community that live there and are gonna be long-term residents. Let's just think this through and scale it back a little bit. We can still comply. Let's scale it back. We're not Farmington. This isn't Farmington Station. This is Roy. Let's keep it Roy. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your input. Hi.
How you doing, Mr. Mayor, Council? Brady McClanahan, 4430 South, 2750 West. I think all the issues that I can find have been addressed by the citizens and council. It was pretty good, so I kind of want to give you an outside perspective of your city. I've been here only 3 years, but the reason I live in Roy, and I live right up against those train tracks, is I'm a member of the United States military. I've been stationed all over the U.S. Every person I've met from Hill Air Force Base told me that Roy is where I want to live when I get here. That's a reputation the city has built. And so far, me and my family are happier than ever. But developments like this going through that have been proposed, that's a reputation that you're going to lose that's going to touch further than you might think. I mean, I've met people in Afghanistan that told me Roy was where I wanted to live when I got here. So your city has an effect. And I think that's an effect you really, really should think about. Hopefully we can keep it going and keep the good word spreading, because it's made my family happy. I know tons that have asked me coming here, where should they live? Roy's the place. That's probably a name you want to keep working on.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you.
If we can, we have some training we've really got to get through tonight. And by the way, this is really going to be really the first of many opportunities as we explore this. So if there's something else you want to add to this, please, Mr. Wilson, do that. Other than that, let's see if we can't go ahead and complete. And then again, please join us in the next ones as we further discuss this.
Leon Wilson at 4302 South, 2675 West. Got a little emotional on that first round. I had to back off. I just had a couple quick questions. Mr. Velasic, last year in January, he's head of Landmark Design. He's running the whole contract, as I understand it, and there's a whole different portion of this study beyond this form-based, which is the transportation study. There is a transportation portion to this. It was stated that that would be completed in 14 months, which would be the end of March. My question is, where's that? Number two, what did this cost? And when I say cost, whether it's the city or the grant in total, it's my understanding that this cost was 50% of the total grant. The other 50% was going to the transportation study.
Let me help you.
Please.
The first thing is that transportation plan, which is a component of what they call the general plan, that's pretty well been worked. There'll be some tweaking that will take place, and I believe the transportation plan is actually on the website. And so you can see that transportation plan as it's already been pretty much approved by the council. That was approved back, I think, in October. What's coming as part of this overall process is really the general plan amendment. The last time the general plan was updated was 2004, and so we're really dealing with an antiquated, for a better word, general plan. And remember, the general plan is a document that allows us to look out 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Interesting enough, what the plan talks to, the general plan says today, has already happened. It talks about bringing in a train station, surprisingly, and it's still talking about sometime in the future. Well, that's already happened. It's really antiquated. And so the general plan amendment is coming right behind this, which will include some of this when it's refined, transportation. There'll be some other components that will be engaged in that, but that's what's coming at us, okay, that we still have to address and we still have to work through in a public meeting. This is just one part of a broader conversation.
Thank you.
Okay?
Now let's step away from all this form-based code for a minute and let me say that I'm a Roy boy, and that means that I have been here as a resident longer than most people have been alive here, okay? I have great pride in Roy High. You too, huh, Ann? So I have a proposal that I want to present to the council. For years, I've thought about Laker Way. And I'm just wondering, has anybody thought about, or have we ever, thought about the possibility of making 4800 to find that street as Royal Way?
I have thought about that a lot. Was going to be one of my things when I got put on the council, was to propose having that being made Royal Way.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love that idea. Anyway.
To your question and the answer to that, all it requires is the Roy City Council to approve it. It becomes a little bit more complex because there may have to be some maybe formal name changes, but unofficial, this council can fundamentally say we're going to call that street and put signs on that street. So if the council, based on a recommendation much like that, believes there's an opportunity to go ahead and single out 4800, in large part because of the Roy High School, then all it takes is a council member to present that. City looks at the legalities of that process, figure out how we can do it, and present it either as an ordinance or as a resolution, and once it's done, it's done.
You know, Ann, you're at the high school a lot. We need to tie
I work there,
this
yeah, there a lot.
somehow into the whole development and having a student body, and I think it could be a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
anyway.
so too.
Thanks again. I
Okay.
appreciate it. I just want you to know, I know you folks, and I know a little bit about what's going on behind the scenes of this thing. And as a little boy, I remember looking over the whole valley and could only remember counting 12 houses. I know we've got to make development plans. And I encourage you to engage us. Let's get the best of what's going on. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay. With that, I'm going to close the public comment. Thank you for your input. This is really important to us. We got a lot of good information. This is the start of many. So please, if you really want to make sure you get contacted, get your name on that list. Let me have your email. I can't call you personally. There's just way too much of that, but I will definitely email you, let you know when we're going to be continuing the dialogue, invite you to participate. Like I say, we're going to work this one until it's right, and when we get it right, we're going to make some votes.
I have a question.
Please.
Actually, I want to make a motion. Can we move the Open and Public Meeting Training Act to another council meeting?
Well, we can't do that. All it requires is going to be changed to this document, but if we feel like that training would be better served, and it does require some time to get through. An Open Meetings Act is a law that simply says the council has to be trained at least once a year. And this was that window. But we can move it to the next
I
meeting.
make a
if
motion, we
necessary.
pitch it to the next council meeting.
Okay. Do I have a
I
second?
second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll move that and table that until the next meeting. So we'll walk right into the city manager report, so please give us some ideas.
Yeah, I'll try to hurry along. Just a couple of things to note. Public Works down there, we're redoing the Parks and Rec building for Public Works. They're currently painting, hopefully pretty soon it'll be open for them. Everything will be ADA compliant for them, but it's looking really good. You guys are welcome to go down there and take a look at it. The Colonel at Hill Air Force Base is coming on Thursday at 1 o'clock. You may know that downstairs for a little bit, we had some military personnel doing some training. They are unable to do it at Hillfield, but the Colonel wanted to come and present an award, mainly to our IT staff. They did a phenomenal job. I think they liked it a little too much because they stayed a little longer, but we loved having them. They were great here. They're actually really, really quiet. We opened the registration of the Roy Fishing Club, got a lot of attention, and it actually filled up quite rapidly. So that has been closed now, I believe. but that will be coming up as well. Last year, we tried to get more people involved in that. Wasn't so successful because so many people were involved and we had too many kids down there. So we limited that to 25 participants. But that's a great thing for the community. We'll also be hosting a PIO training. What that is a Public Information Officer training. The state of Utah is coming down. It's not just for Roy City. We're just hosting it. It's typically down in Salt Lake, but that's going to train staff. It's free for staff to go to it. If it's going to be on February 19th and 20th of this month, obviously. So hopefully there will be a lot of good things that come out of that. They usually have the training down south, closer to Salt Lake, but I talked him into coming up here. So we're excited to have them here.
And who's invited?
It's actually, the training was opened up to everybody. Just wanted to sign up for it. I have a good relationship with the individual that's doing the training. But members of other communities are also coming to it. What a PIO is if you were to see somebody on the news, that's usually their public information officer. So we have staff from the Parks and Rec Department, Public Works, Fire. Traditionally, police has always been really good to have a PIO representative. Matt Gwen and Mandy Wharton right now are current PIOs in the police department. But that's who, so we'll have people here from Clearfield City, I know, even some of the school district members I believe might be coming, so.
Members of city council invited?
Yeah, let me know if you want to if you want to come to it, and I can get you signed up. I was mentioned before, I had a good relationship with them. If you go on the state's website, it is closed because it gained so much attention so quick because it's been a while since it's been up north. So just let me know and I'll reach out for you. Perfect. So that's it.
Thank you. Okay. Council, you have any comments, anything you'd like to share?
Just quickly.
Please.
Numbskull opened February 3rd. They're right in the Harmons Marketplace Plaza. They do vintage video and electronic repair. But if you look in there, their name is Numbskull. And I believe this is their second store. Their first one is in Salt Lake. So we're excited to have them. Also, the Business Advisory Board is going to be rolling out a campaign to promote all local business. And I think they're going to make their presentation 2 weeks from now to the council. But we're working on letting people know that Roy's open for business. That's it.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I just
Please.
have one kudo. I have to say that our Roy Senior Center made the news. Weber Human Services, which actually covers several counties besides Weber, as a big food drive over Martin Luther King weekend. And our Roy Senior Center donated 888 pounds of food, which was absolutely #1. And they got like over 2,000, but we skunked them all. And I just want to give kudos to our senior center.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Anybody else? One last comment, and then we'll ask for an adjournment. You can tell, council, that we had a lot of involvement. This was a great opportunity to hear the piece and the conversation of our residents on important issues. I'm going to propose to you an idea. It's not uncommon that cities basically can establish ad hoc committees. Ad hoc, reporting to the council in terms of things that they think is important to them and how they can play as part of this process. I'm going to propose to you in our next meeting that simply says, would the council consider by resolution to establish an 8-member ad hoc committee from representation from the community, the very areas that we're talking about, to be part of that committee, to fundamentally help us to structure how we can make this work, both in meeting the needs of the form-based code at that train station area, but also figure out what we can and cannot do and what we should do to be able to make this work for everybody. I think they had some good ideas. I've got a full page of things that they have. I think they can give it, but they can be a good spokesperson to the broader community if we can, in fact, tap into some of these ideas and have them engage with us and provide us some information before this council is asked to vote in terms of the new direction of coding in that area.
Excellent
Think about
idea.
that. I think there's some real opportunity here. Ponder that. We'll bring it up in our next meeting, but it might be an opportunity.
Can I just
Please.
add to that? If that were to be the case, I would like them to work through that committee as opposed to having 60 individual comments. If we're going to do that, then it would be nice if they were absolutely useful as opposed to just in name only. I would like them to funnel their concerns through that. I'm happy to address all the concerns. I wrote down every person's name that spoke to us tonight. However, many of them were repetitive, if you notice. So, you know, if they were going to use that committee, I think it would be really helpful if we used a committee of that nature.
And I think that surely could be one opportunity, but we can surely lay out a strategy that says, how can we make this work and get the input to see if that's workable? And in my opinion, they'll have a direct voice to the city council and how we help frame this proposal in large part before the council is expected to vote.
Well,
So-
currently, they have a direct voice to the council through this.
They do, but we're
Forum.
taking notes. I'd like to get something in writing. I'd like to forward some stuff. I'd like to work this if we can. And I would ask that a council member, whether it be a mayor or a council member, basically be a liaison to this group and help to be able to get the resources and stuff and the information they need so we can get some substantive kinds of things to happen. Ponder the idea. I think it has merit. We can basically secure something in our next meeting, but think about that, because we had a lot of people had some really interesting ideas and want to be involved, or they would never been here. Let's see if we can tap into that resource and make a difference. Think about that, would you? Okay, do I have a motion then to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, and thank you for joining us. It was a good meeting. Thank you.